This is the Perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah!
It's not the little things that matter, because they're the only things that matter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, as usual, the man, the myth, the legend, Micah Shalansky. Micah, how are you, my friend?
Jarvis, it's another beautiful day in paradise. How could I possibly complain? And we get to talk some shop today, which I always love doing, so it's fantastic.
Well, and of course, this episode here, we are at the end of July, so we're more than halfway through the year, which means end of July, there's 24/7 sun in Anchorage right now. Like you haven't even seen darkness for weeks at this point, right?
Well, so the end of July is actually starting to get a little bit darker because the solstice, June 21st, is when we have the most sun. And then it's very slowly adding a little bit of darkness per day. And then we're really going to notice it about the end of August. That's when we're actually going to have nights starting to come back. But yes, pretty much sunshine all around the clock. And as you know what it is like when you're up here, you know, all of a sudden you're tired and you're like, well, you were up here when the sun was up a lot. And you were like, Micah, man, you sure do put your kids to bed early because the sun was still out and whatnot. I'm like, dude, what time is it? He's like, holy crap, it's 9:30.
Yeah, it's 9:30. It's 10 p.m. It's 10 p.m. That's funny. Well, I will confess, Micah, having recently been up there for the 4th of July, that I'm disappointed that what I otherwise view as a patriotic state is not very into 4th of July fireworks. Though, again, because it doesn't get dark ever.
That is true. Jarvis did text and he was like, hey, so do we do a big fireworks thing and whatnot? I was like, bud, I really appreciate that. And they're super cool in Alaska around New Year's because it's dark all the time, right? So you can do fireworks all the time. But the 4th of July, there are some people that set them off. But it's just not the same when you have the boom, but none of the colors.
None of the sparkle. Nah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the boom and none of the sparkles, let's talk about the little things that matter in client communications, right? And so we can even, I get this is a bit of a tortured tie-in here, but just about the idea of like, oh, let me come up to Alaska and do fireworks the 4th of July. Oh, wait, it's never dark at that time of the year. Not never, but not at fireworks times. Same with client meetings. You and I, Micah, we've had the opportunity, obviously, to sit in a ton of our own client meetings. We now train our other lead advisors on their client meetings. And we watch a lot of client meetings that advisors in our coaching programs have done. And it's rare that we see really egregious mistakes. We do sometimes see them, and we quickly text each other about those. But more often than not, it's very, very small things that seem insignificant, but can completely shift the dynamic of a client meeting.
Yeah, and this goes back to one thing we talk about with our advisors all the time. Everything counts.
Yes.
Everything helps or it hurts. Everything counts. So if everything counts, I want as much in the plus column and as little in the minus column as I possibly can, right? Because one negative thing is it takes away 10 positive things. So you really need as much things positive in this communication as you could possibly have with the client. So that's from how you're dressed to how you greet them to the confirmation calls to the pre-appointment communications, right? Everything matters as you're stacking the deck in your favor. Now, why am I stacking the deck in my favor? Because my goal when the client comes in is to be fully present in that meeting, to hear what the clients have to say, to hear what their concerns are, and help guide them down the path for financial independence. That is my goal of the meeting, right? And if I don't kind of stack the deck in my favor where I can accomplish that, I'm not helping the client.
Yeah, and as we often like to talk about when it comes to financial planning, or retirement income guardrails, or retirement income timelines, the only work that you do as a financial planner that counts are the things that the client implements. So even if we have the most elaborate tax strategy, the most elaborate income plan, investment models, whatever it is, if the client doesn't have the confidence in you to follow your advice, especially when the markets are down or things are crazy, then none of it matters. And so we think, well, if I'm talking about Roth conversions, it doesn't matter how I articulate it, it's just about getting the money in. Yeah, but if you talk about Roth conversions and the client doesn't do Roth conversions, then it doesn't matter. And so these little things, again, they feel trivial. They make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, they're massively important, right? As we start kind of building these things up. And it's with the communication side, it's making sure that they're paying attention to you. Are you talking about things in a negative manner? Are you talking about things in a positive manner? What's another reason we don't like talking politics inside of a client meeting? It does not matter if you agree or disagree with the person in their politics. Politics is not a positive discussion. It leaves a negative aroma, negative taste in your mouth when you're talking about it. And that's just not helpful in doing this. Now, I often tell clients when they bring up politics, politics, I'll try to pivot that conversation back out, which we're pretty good at. If it goes back down that rabbit hole, I like to say, you know what? This is a great beer and wine conversation, right? So I'd love to grab a beer with you or some wine and we can talk about this. But right now, let's focus on what we can control, which is your financial independence. Is that going to be okay with you?
Yeah, I know we both commonly use this joke when we're talking about taxes. We say, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you wouldn't believe it, but when President Biden called me last week, he didn't want to talk about the new tax law. And they either immediately get the joke and they laugh or they get puzzled. And I said, no, of course he didn't call me. And if he did, we'd probably have a few other things to talk about first before we got to the tax law. But let's go with what the law is as it stands, right? And so we can tell these jokes and we can have some fun with it. Again, put some levity into the situation. Now, I've seen advisors err on the side of this, by the way, Micah. You and I insert a lot of levity and just little jokes, right? Like you've got your one about this isn't like going to the dentist, you're not going to leave in pain kind of thing. Right. And it's a funny one. Sometimes, though, and these are little things, the advisors get too far. So they think, like, I need to tell a joke, or I need to tell a funny story, or I need to tell, like, every detail of my fishing story. No, that's going too far. So everything exists on a spectrum, and knowing where on the spectrum comedy falls or anything else is very important.
Yeah, massively, massively important for sure. So let's kind of look at these a little bit as to what are these little things that we see kind of come up and kind of dissect them. I know one of the things that came up the other day was, you know what, to be honest, this is da-da-da-da-da. That's what an advisor said. And whenever someone says to be honest, in my mind, I have a pause. It's like, wait, are you being honest now or are you always honest? Are you sometimes honest? Right? When does that honesty come in? Then if you don't say to be honest, are you not being honest, right? Now it brings in this little question that says, are you really being truthful? Now, what the advisor is trying to communicate with them is like saying, hey, this is the way it's worked with my clients. This is some things I've seen in the past. So we can easily pivot that, Jarvis, from the to be honest stance. We could say, you know what? How this works with most of my clients is A, B, and C. Now, I love to work with that and use that language that's there for a couple of reasons. How this works with most of my clients is. Now, why? Because one, it shows I have more than one client, right? There's a little bit of built-in social credibility inside of there. It works with most of my clients, not all of my clients. So I can say, hey, you could be the one client we work with that this doesn't make a fit for you, and that's okay. We'll find a better solution, right? So I'm not saying it's an all or nothing. I'm not trying to be super absolute with it. I like to be a little bit more open to have the client come with me on a journey, especially if I'm talking to a higher D or someone who's a little bit more confrontational in the meeting. You leave it language a little bit more open and broad. It's easier to be walking down the path.
Want to highlight that these are, again, they're true statements. We're trying to draw the client's attention to things that exist, right? It's a true statement that I have multiple clients. It's a true statement that this works for most of my clients, right? But I need to draw the client's attention to that, right? This is a version of the dishwasher rule. Another example of that I often use, Micah, especially with prospective clients, is most of our clients are just like you. They also are trying to decide the best time to take Social Security. They're also trying to figure out how to get money out of their nest egg. Great news. This is what we do every single day. Another one I'll use, Mr. and Mrs. Client, this is your first, and if we do this right, your only retirement, but we've been helping people retire for decades, and we're really, really good at it. Now, should that go without saying? I don't know. Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't. Either way, I want to let them know, hey, I'm really good at this because I am really good at this. And we've been doing this a long time. And I'm also seeding in there, if this is done right, this will be your only retirement. Letting them know that they could, in fact, screw this up and they may have to retire twice and it's not going to be a good thing.
You know, that's the other one that I like to say inside of here is, hey, inside of our process of success,
I love that one.
This is what we use, da-da-da-da-da. Now, the reason I like process of success is, number one, to show that we actually have a process. There's an order of operations that matters when you're doing financial planning. So number one, it sets that undertone and that it's a successful process. When you follow this, you will succeed, right? That's what I want to show inside of here. And also making sure that we're guiding clients with it. And if they come back and they want to do something that's outside of that, it says, hey, that's kind of outside of our process of success. I'm not saying it can't work, but here's the issues that we see when we do not follow our process of success.
Micah, another one I use, in fact, I used it last week with a client who's retiring. And I explained, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, other than the last couple of generations, right? So your grandparents, maybe your great-great-grandparents, no one in human history retired. We all worked until we couldn't work anymore. And then shortly thereafter, we died. And that was just all of human history. So we have no biological programming for retirement. So Mr. and Mrs. Client, don't be alarmed if when you retire and you stop earning a paycheck for the first time in your adult life, and you stop saving for the first time in your adult life, and you start taking money out of your nest egg for your first time in your adult life, then it gets really scary.
Yes.
And I ask you, don't be embarrassed about that. It's that caveman programming. Call me when that happens. It will happen. Call me when that happens, and we'll be glad to run through our plan again and explain why we're not going to run out of money and die. And most clients, Mike, I know you use something similar, they get this big sense of relief, almost like a child when they've realized that they were like hiding something, not something like I shouldn't have done, but just like, hey, I didn't want anybody to know that I also had nightmares at night or whatever it is. Like this sense of relief just washes over them. Like, actually, I have kind of been thinking about that and I couldn't put a name to it.
Yeah, and that's so important, Jarvis, right? Because these are emotions that they're going to have, things they're going to see, you know, and I like to explain it with clients too when we're talking about the distributions of just saying, hey, look, you've worked for 20, 30, 40 years. Every 2 weeks you put money into your TSP, you're buying. The market goes up, but you're still buying. And you tell yourself, you know what, this isn't really my money for today. It's my money for the future. It's okay if it fluctuates. You don't feel great about it, but you kind of tell yourself that. Now the day has come that it's your money that you need. Not only you're not putting any money in, you're taking money out of your account every single month. So what's going to happen? You're going to retire. The market's going to fall 20% like it normally does. That's a normal market cycle. I wouldn't get worried about it in the slightest. The market falls 20%, but now you're selling, and you're watching your account value go down that you have to live on for the rest of your life. How do you think you're going to feel about that? Right? And they're like, it's going to be scary. But like, absolutely, right? That's the only rational thing to do is it's going to be scary. Great news. This is why we have a plan to take care of these distributions in a down market to make sure you're not harmed. And this is why we're setting it up this way, right? So again, I want to validate that concern that I know they're going to have.
Now, for those of you listening in your car or not watching this on YouTube, which you can watch these on YouTube, Micah, you had hand motions the whole time, not just, this is again a distinction between amateurs and pros, not just waving your hands around because you had idle energy. It was
spirit fingers.
That's right. As the market goes down and you're illustrating this go down and the market goes up, you're illustrating with your hand going up, right? These are your body language is so critical. And a lot of times that's a wasted resource. When we watch recordings of advisors, they're either sitting super rigid or they're making nervous gestures that don't really mean anything. That's another way that the little things count. Micah, speaking of the little things, in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, he talked about pros that could recognize things at a blink of an eye, right? That, hey, this has gone on, or there's something odd here. I noticed the same thing with people inside the advisory space. I only need to talk to them for a few minutes, whether they're an advisor or a consultant to advisors, or they claim they were once an advisor. I can tell pretty quickly what their income is and what the value they're delivering to the clients is by just how they communicate. And I'm eerily spot on, especially when it comes to industry experts. You know, they'll say like, hey, listen, when you meet with a client, be sure to ask them if they have any questions. Oh, if they have any questions, well, that's a closed-ended question. They're going to say, no, you weren't a very good advisor. I guarantee you did not make very much money or deliver much value in your career because this is a rookie move. Hey, do you have any questions? No, the pro move is, Mr. and Mrs. Klein, I have several things I want to go over with you today. But first and foremost on my list, tell me what questions and concerns you have. Tell me what things are on your mind. And then I pause and I sit back and my pen is ready to take notes and I'm ready to go. And then when they say whatever they say, oh, I don't really have anything or have this thing. Oh, that's great. I've got that. We'll cover that. What else is on your mind? What else is keeping you up at night? What else has you concerned? What else would you like to solve here today? Those are the differences between the amateurs and the pros.
You know, Jarvis, just to highlight that a little bit.
Yeah, please.
So when I was starting in my career, and my dad would always, our clients are always in the lobby, and the advisor picks up the clients from the lobby and brings them into the conference room. Right? So it's a little different than you and us. And one of the things my dad would always say is he'd come up and he'd meet the clients and greet them and say, come on up, let's visit. Come on up, let's chat. Right? And he'd invite them into the conference room. And I'm like, why would you say that? This isn't a visit, this is chat. This is a serious business meeting about serious finances, right? We have an agenda. We have stuff to cover, and go through it. And of course, what does he know? I would do it differently.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that didn't work out well, by the way. But anyways, it took me a while to realize that's really what we're going for is we're going for a visit. We're going for it. Yes, we have an agenda of things we need to do, but we're going for a casual chit chat. Why? Because I want the client to be comfortable. If the client is comfortable, they will ask the questions they need to ask. Yes, there's a subset of some people that, regardless of how comfortable they are, they're going to drill you with the questions. Fantastic. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. The vast majority of people will not ask the detailed and important questions if they don't feel comfortable. How do you set that arena up with your office, right? That's why we have couches. That's why we have cookies. That's why we have hot water and coffee and tea and all these other things, is we want to create a little bit more of a relaxing environment, not a sterile office clinician environment. Like you go see the doctor and you sit on the crinkly paper and you have 12 minutes with a doctor while they're not paying attention to you before they go on to the next appointment, right? That is a way to run a business, and they trillions of dollar industry, right? Clearly doing something right. But that's not how we're choosing to run our practice. So be hyper intentional about that. What are you trying to encourage the client to do? And if you're trying to encourage it, be careful of your behaviors. Just like Jarvis, you had brought up these great things about questions, right? When a client asks a question, no matter where you are at, or if you see a question pop up on a client's face, no matter where you are at, you will probably stop and you will say, hey, did you have a question about this? Am I right?
Yeah, oh, totally. Even the smallest, it's almost like we're playing poker, the smallest tell, right? Just a little bit of change in body language, a little bit of change in facial expression, a twitch of the corner of the mouth. Like I'm watching for that constantly. Mike, when you mentioned about when people come into your office, one thing that I've noticed in your office is when I walk in the front door, and at first I was flattered. I thought it was because of me. It's really when anybody walks in, whoever is working the reception desk stands up to greet whoever's coming in. Now that, it may seem like a small thing. They have other things going on, right? But that makes a big difference. You really feel like a welcomed guest versus, again, the doctor's office where they won't even make eye contact with you, right? And you're standing there like, do they know I'm here?
Banging on the plexiglass.
Is there any, like, hey, I'm here. My arm has got chopped off. Like, can you pay attention to me? These things make a big difference. Mike, if I can pause for just 1 second. Hey, speaking of making a big difference, really excited to announce that we have formed our first official strategic partnership with the Perfect RIA podcast and Belay Virtual Assistants. Now, we've been doing the podcast for 4 years now, Micah, 5 years, 1.5 million downloads. It's incredible. And we've always talked about the importance of delegation. We've laughed about it. We've joked about it. We've gotten on the soapbox about it. And advisor after advisor comes and says, hey, Matt, Mike, I get this. I need to delegate. Where do I find someone? And up until now, we didn't really have a good answer, but we're really excited. I've been working for the last 6 months with Belay on my own personal assistant, Zach. In fact, Micah, just this week, Zach booked my car tinting. He booked my trips to Europe. I'm taking a trip to Europe to speak at the CISI conference. He took care of paying multiple vendors, and he scheduled a handful of meetings that I thought were going to be impossible to schedule. So if you need a virtual assistant, which everyone does, Trisha, the CEO of Belay, was on the podcast a few weeks ago. She said, everyone has an assistant. It's either a person or it's you, which I loved. Text the letters RIA, it's like Registered Investment Advisor, RIA to 55123, and you'll get a copy of their free guide on how to delegate in your life. And of course, when you hire Belay Virtual Assistant, be sure to mention our name so that they know that this was, in fact, a valuable partnership.
Yeah, and that's a great thing, right? Have a virtual assistant or not. I know I'm trying to remember the author's name. He wrote World-Class Personal Assistant. But this is the same thing. You always are looking to up your game on the personal assistant. So even if you have one or not, text RIA to 55123, 55123. Why? Because get that list of things to delegate. Get that list about things to do. How do you up your game by the little things? Because it's every little detail that matters. And if you can learn how to better delegate, you're going to get more results out of your assistants.
Yeah, and this ties back to our discussion, Micah, of the little things make a big difference. The reason that you and I can have the time to greet a client in the lobby, to walk in and be full of energy, right? Yes. When I walk into the client room, I'm like, they're more excited to see me than anyone they've seen all week, or I'm more excited to see them than anyone else they've run into, right? Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Client, how are you doing? How was your trip? How's your family? And I'm so excited to see them. One of the reasons I can do that is, to pick this week specifically, I'm not worried about how am I going to book my flight to London in the fall. You know what? I delegated that. I've got a guy taking care of that. I can stay really focused here. So part of being able to focus on the small things is getting rid of other small things that other people can do.
I love it. So back on the communication side, right, of what we're talking about with clients, let's keep in mind some other quick little examples that we're going to run into that we kind of heard people say. And one is saying okay versus is that okay with you, right? Now, there's times to ask open-ended questions like, do you have any questions?
Of course.
That's a closed-ended question, right?
Yeah.
Versus what other questions do you have, right? I'm asking more of an open-ended to get more of a response. But there's sometimes in the client communication where I'm just looking for little mini yeses to make sure they're understanding what I'm presenting, right? Whether it's the first time going through the retirement income timeline, or maybe it's going through buckets or something of that nature, or just talking in general about estate planning. There's times I need to pause and ask open-ended questions to get feedback. Then there's times I need check-in responses, right? And that's what this is. This is a check-in response about, have I lost you? Are you still on the same page? Is everything still good, etc.? And I love that one. Is that going to be okay with you? That's my check-in response to make sure that we're still both on the same page.
Yeah, the other one I like to use is, did I miss anything here? So as we walked through this, did I miss anything? Were there other questions or concerns that you had? So again, your example, those are closed-ended, but it gives me a check-in. So I'm listening in their voice and their expression. It gives me a reason to pause. Sometimes I get kind of just rushing along. So like, oh, let me just check in here. Hey, is that okay with you? And I can pause and I can sit back. Even though it's a bit of a rhetorical question, like you said, I'm still giving a check-in. Another one, Micah, I use with email correspondence. This is especially important. It's really easy to miss things. Whenever I'm explaining anything in an email, I mean, almost to a comical level, I always end with, if this is all about as clear as mud, ... and then I put a smiley face emoji. I just put it in there because it's dumb, whatever. If this is about as clear as mud, let's get on a call. Here's a link to my calendar, or calling can get you on my calendar. So I want to give them an easy out. Partly, I don't want a bunch of emails coming back and forth, but I want to give them this out, right? This way to tap out and say, actually, this email didn't make any sense to me. You missed the entire thing, without them feeling embarrassed.
Yeah, and this is the one thing we got to keep in mind, right? Especially with the younger generations, we feel that email going back and forth is positive communication, and it is not.
It's not.
That's why we have a 2 email policy in our office. You are only allowed 2 emails with a client, then you must pick up the phone and call them. If we did not get something clarified within 2 emails, we have missed what the client was asking for, and we need to pick up the phone and get clarity on that. Then maybe we're going to respond in writing to them in email, which is just fine, but we're going to pick up the phone and we're going to have that conversation with the client to make sure we're picking up on things. It was one thing that had come up just recently on with a client with RMDs. They had an inherited IRA, and she emailed in the office, and she's like, and she said, the client was like, was my RMD taken care of? And the team's response was, yes, absolutely. We took care of your RMD in February. And the client was like, well, how much was my RMD and where did it go? And so the team responded back with their net RMD and how much was deposited in their bank account and when it went.
Sure.
Right. And then the client was emailed back. She's like, no, that wasn't my question. And so it was like a good pause right here. It says,
call, please call.
Correct. I was like, aha, we have failed to understand what the client's question is. Now, from your eyes, the way you're reading it, you have clearly answered the question. But this is now the second email they're asking about their RMD. There's a question behind the question. Pick up the phone and call. What she was calling about is she wants to get ready because she likes to do her own taxes on TurboTax. And she wants to get ready for next year to write down what her gross RMD was and where did it go, because it's a question TurboTax asked. That wasn't what was in the email, right? But that's what she was going for. So this is a time if the team wouldn't have picked up the phone and called the client and said, oh, I'm so sorry. I think I'm just misreading what you're saying. Please let me know what you would like. Happy to work with you on this, right? No frustration, no hassle whatsoever in her voice. The client beforehand, most of our clients want to know where their net money goes, right? They're not super concerned with the gross distribution and TurboTax rules.
Totally. The other place this gets carried away, and this is, I hate to say younger generation, makes me feel old, is the email starts to become like instant messaging, right?
Yes.
And text messaging. Hey, how about Thursday at 2? No, Thursday at 2 doesn't work. Well, what about Wednesday at 4? No, Wednesday at 4 doesn't work. And then all of a sudden there's a 20 email chain and nothing has gotten done. So I love the 2 email rule. If at 2 emails you haven't gotten this, you need to get on the phone. That's also where things like scheduling links really help. And that's right. Hey, if this is as clear as mud, here's a link to my calendar. Go ahead and jump on for 15 minutes and let's chat through this. So, and this is where you and I were talking about this before the recording, Micah. With your team and yourself, you need to constantly be revisiting your communication policy. When is it okay to email? When is it okay to pick up a phone? How does the client, there's another one, when someone answers your phone in your office, do they say, hey, let me see if Micah's available, which is code for, let me see if you're important enough to talk to him? Or they say, boy, Mr. or Mrs. Client, so glad to hear from you. Micah's working with other clients right now. Is there something that I can help you with? And then we kind of go through that whole process.
Yeah, so that's really important to be asking these follow-up questions. Let's be clear in communications and then setting good expectations with this as well, right? So outside the client meeting or inside the client meeting, of saying, hey, when we say we're going to do something, make sure we're telling the client the date it will be done. It can be done sooner, but no later than X date. Why is that important? That's an integrity thing, right? Can you do the things you said you were going to do? That's the first one. Number two, but it's also, does that date meet their expectations? How many times have we sat in a client meeting and a client has asked for something you thought relatively mundane? And it's like, yeah, not a problem. I'll get to that like Wednesday of next week. They're like, no, Mike, I need that on Friday because I'm about to leave for 3 weeks on a Europe trip. Remember when I asked you about big expenses and travel you had coming up and you didn't mention that, right? But these things come up that time. And so by setting when we're going to have our job done, it allows the client to agree to it. And even if they didn't have anything coming up, if they thought it was something small and they should get an email back in an hour and it's now been 3 days and they're like, WTF, how come you don't have this information? We have failed to meet the client's expectations. This goes back to everything counts. But if I set that expectation, it's by X day, it allows them to agree with it or to push back on it, and we can set a new date together.
Yeah, and a lot of this ties back to that old concept of extreme ownership. I guess it's not that old, right? The Jocko Willink extreme ownership, right? Anytime a client is not understanding what you've said and is not following your processes or feels irritated or frustrated or disappointed or let down, that is on you. That's your opportunity to step up your game. And that's something that comes up a lot of times when we're coaching advisors, right? They say, in fact, one comes to mind, Micah, hey, I took this person all the way through the prospect process, and then I realized they were just a DIYer, and what a bum, wasted all my time. Oh, wait, no, hang on a second.
Stop. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they followed the process that you outlined. Now you either need to change, you need to change your process, right? Or just accept that's an inevitable outcome, but to blame it on somebody else to say, oh, the client didn't understand my email. How come the client didn't tell me about their Europe trip, whatever it is? No, we need to say, I need to take ownership. I did not pull out that question. I did not set that expectation. I did not communicate that clearly. That's on me.
Jarvis, kind of adding to that one as well is kind of demeanor inside of the office. And a team member that's no longer working with us. And one of the things that had come up is they would use a mocking tone when talking to clients when they thought, I know the look on your face is exactly what I was thinking. They would use a mocking tone to explain what a client was saying later, as if when they were frustrated about it. I'm like, hard stop.
Stop.
I don't know where that attitude's coming from. I don't care where it's coming from. That is not acceptable in this office. The client has a need. We are there to help them. We do not use a mocking tone. I was like, how is that productive in any way with it?
No. And that goes to a core rule of we only work with people we like and respect.
Yes.
Right? Doesn't mean we're going to be BFFs. It doesn't mean we agree with everything they do. It doesn't mean we have the same political beliefs or anything like that, but we only work with people we like and respect. And if there's somebody that we don't respect, we don't want to get their name on the caller ID, or we're mocking them, or we're belittling their financial choices, that is somebody that we have an obligation to stop working with. Either we need to check our attitude, which is often the case, or we need to realize, hey, that person we're doing a disservice to that person. Yeah, boy, Micah, those ones are terrible. Every once in a while that does come up, and that can't happen.
Yeah, not the attitude, not the environment. We have a drama-free environment, and that's one of our rules when we're hiring a new team member. Great news, we have a drama-free environment. That means if you get hired and drama gets started, you get fired because more than likely you were the cause of it. So pretty simple. Speaking of firing, that's not action items. All right, anyways, we're going to move on to action items. This podcast is all about taking action and moving your practice to the next level. Now, it's super easy to sit back and to look at other people's practices and hear the podcast and be like, this is what other people do, but I don't do that. I'm better than this. You know what? I have caught myself more than once after starting these podcasts of saying, I don't do this 100% of the time. Or you know what? There's really room for improvement in how I need to change my language and how I need to up my game. We are students of the craft. We are students of the game to deliver massive value to clients. That's the game we're in. And how do we up that? So you need to pick 2 to 3 things this week that you can improve upon, whether it's asking for mini clarification questions, whether it's asking more open-ended questions, having a better agenda, right? Go back to the podcast, pick 1 or 2 things. 2 or 3 things. Be a rock star. Pick 2 or 3 things that you can do this week and say, these are what I'm going to work on to get better at.
Yeah, and remember that your meeting process, if you've been in practice any period of time, is almost entirely habit, right? It's almost entirely habit. So to break that, you're going to need a whole process. So whatever those 2 or 3 things are, I'd put them on a Post-it note. I'd have them on your monitor. I'd put a little cue in your client meetings, a little note on your agenda to remind yourself, hey, I'm going to ask them, please tell me what questions and concerns are on your mind, or did we miss anything? Or, hey, I'm going to have this done by this date, by this person. Is that okay with you? Action item number 2, we mentioned this earlier in the podcast, text the letters RIA to 55123 to get a free copy of Belay's Guide to Delegation. If you've ever considered having a virtual assistant, if you've ever considered it, if you don't have a personal assistant, executive assistant, get on that thing now. I've just yet to meet, Micah, anybody that's gotten to high levels of success without having an assistant in place.
Amen. And I'm going to say the third action item, if you haven't joined us for our live training we're doing with advisors, you got to join us. We've done 2 virtual live trainings so far. It has gone over fantastic. This is where Jarvis and I meet with our team members. We go through our internal processes. How do things work? How do we go through this? We do the retirement income timeline. We've gone through one-page financial plans. We're tackling investment recommendations with clients next. It will be absolutely amazing. The only way to make sure you can join that is by being a member of the Perfect RIA. So join up, become a member of Backstage Pass or Invictus. Jump on that training. It has had some phenomenal reviews. It's pretty in-depth and super excited to continue that going forward.
Yeah, and then specific for our Invictus members, our fall mastermind is at the end of September in partnership with the Retirement Tax Services Conference, which is only for Invictus members. Mike, I was just on the phone last week with an Invictus member, and he's been in the industry a long time, great practice. And he says, Jarvis, I did not think that type of event could happen. I did not think it was possible. Blew his mind. Fee increases, which we'll have to chat about. He was trying to get out of his extreme accountability, which did not happen.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that one. That'll be another episode. But whatever you're doing, a friend of ours, Scott Rusnick, just published his new book. And he talked about most people will be in the same place a year from now that they are right now. Mm-hmm. And don't let that be you, right? If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll be where you've always been.
Amen. Well, until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.